A lot of people nowadays regret their college degrees for a wide variety of reasons. As 18-year-olds, we really don't know what careers are, or what kinds of fields are the most in demand, or really, what kind of career would work best for us. This leads to people blindly choosing university degrees that turn out to be a waste of time and money, and in a lot of cases, they graduate worse off than when they started. So how can you avoid this? In this video, I will discuss the worst ways to pick a field of study in college, and more importantly, help you to utilize the best criteria to make a decision that will lead you to a fulfilling and lucrative career. Before we discuss the worst ways to choose a major in college, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel to continue learning more about how to find a fulfilling career in engineering or in another field. And be sure to stick around to the end to help you get the advice you need to make the consequential decision of which degree to choose. So one of the first worst ways we will discuss about how to choose your college degree is simply choosing the highest paying degree. So I'm not about to tell you that money has no impact on happiness and that it's not important to pursue a decent paying career or a decent paying degree. But if you went for the highest paying bachelor degree, let's say, you would be studying petroleum engineering, and that would result in you probably working out on an oil rig in a remote area in Texas or elsewhere in the South for the foreseeable future after graduation. And you'd be making a lot of money, but you'd be stuck in this really tiny niche area, separate, very likely separated from your friends and family. And I mean, if you don't mind that, or if your family actually lives near there or your friends near there, then more power to you. But for many of us, this would actually be pretty miserable and it just wouldn't be sustainable. We wouldn't be enjoying this life out on an oil rig or in a very remote area near an oil rig. And we would eventually pretty quickly actually be thinking, how do I get out of this? What else can I be doing to make money that wouldn't leave me stuck out here? Or if you pursue being a medical doctor just for the money, you're going to have very limited work-life balance during your residency years specifically, and that's a minimum of 3 years, where the doctors that I've known were saying that it's over 12-hour shifts, in some cases more like 15 plus, and having to be woken up in the middle of the night when you're on call and stuff like that. And during residency years, I mean, it gets better after that, but still not by a ton necessarily. But in a lot of cases, the doctors actually spend way more time fighting insurance companies than you expect. They spend a lot more time trying to tell insurance companies why they have to cover certain things than they actually spend treating patients and interacting with patients. And so that turns out to just be frustrating and annoying and not the kind of work that you expect. And so this combination of work-life balance and what kind of work you're doing is really not going to have money make up for that. And it might not even work out because medical school turns out to not work out for a lot of people. It's really hard to get into. You're competing with the best of the best and everything. So choosing this path because it's one of the highest paying degrees, it just doesn't work out. Because the reality is, being poor probably will make you unhappy, but being rich might not necessarily make you happy. It's one of those double-edged sword type of things where one extreme will make you unhappy, but the other extreme might not necessarily make you happy, at least not in the long run. Because a lot of the studies show that happiness increases with salary up to around 80K per year, and happiness doesn't increase a ton after that. And I mean, maybe in recent years with tons of inflation and tons of housing costs increasing and such, maybe this number needs to be adjusted. But I mean, let's just say like once you're at a certain salary where you have an easy-ish time avoiding certain financial problems and sources of stress, that's going to help you a lot at that point, and that's going to be good for your happiness at that point. But after that, it's going to become more and more diminishing returns. You buy more and more possessions or vacations, which in the first few of those things, it makes you happy. And then with diminishing returns, it kind of decreases over time. And so that's kind of where this idea that money doesn't buy happiness comes from, is that money is definitely a diminishing returns type of situation when it comes to happiness. So let's move on to our second worst way that you can pick your college degree. And it's not necessarily in order of the first worst and the second worst, which is the second one we're talking about, which is follow your passion. So what interests us when we, let's say, watch a documentary or a fictional show about it, or just something that's a hobby, it's not necessarily what's going to make a fulfilling or lucrative career. Because the medical and law fields they're very different in real life than what you'll see in Grey's Anatomy or Law and Order. A lot of people find that out the hard way. And even for documentaries, which are based on real things, the filmmakers are selective about what is shown. Documentaries, like, even though they are nonfiction and they are based on real things, there is definitely an element of selectiveness to it for the sake of getting people to watch it. So, for instance, I didn't like my position at a metallurgical foundry, but I could see how, like, watching a documentary about it would be interesting, because a documentary about it would show just the general process of melting metal, making these big sand castings, pouring the metal into the sand castings and letting it cool off and into the finalized product. Like, that would actually be really interesting. It wouldn't be hours and hours of showing quality control type of things and paperwork and stuff, which is what the job was. So that's one of the reasons why just because something's your passion doesn't mean that it's going to actually make you happy as a career, because you're not necessarily going to have a main focus on that thing. And there was a point in my life, more like as a kid or an adolescent, that I wanted to become a pilot. And had I done this, I'd be working a lot of random, non-standard hours. I would only be getting paid for time spent in the air, which would be really frustrating with all the work that pilots have to do before and after flights, checklists and stuff. And I'd constantly be having to train for emergencies that will never occur in real life, which I'm not a particularly, like, for instance, I don't do super well with things like roller coasters, and that's where, like, it's kind of similar in this case, where you're dealing with all these stressful emergency situations that will probably never occur in real life, but you're constantly having to train for them. And so my point is just these three things it's just not me. I'd rather not have random non-standard hours, and I don't particularly do well with practicing emergencies. And I mean, some people would do well with that. Some people would rather fly planes than have standard hours, and it's their passion and that overcomes it, and that's great. Good for them. But if I had gone that route, then I think it wouldn't have worked out super well for me. And then things that we're passionate about often don't really have that much opportunity, or in some cases they just don't at all. Like, we hear about a lot of people studying art history and because they're passionate about it. And for instance, art history only has positions in very limited numbers of museums or universities compared to the people who study it. Because areas like film, photography, those have tons of people interested in them, and the market is really saturated for that reason. And even for some STEM degrees, like, say, biology, very few employers have a practical use for your knowledge of cell parts or Punnett squares and stuff. Like, it seems useful and it seems interesting, and you know what? To some extent, it actually is. It's actually very useful that we know this stuff about genetics and how certain traits or certain susceptibility to diseases, for instance, and stuff get carried on through the gene pool. And it is useful just knowing how the human body works and stuff. But unfortunately, like, and this is just one example of a STEM degree that turns out to not be super practical, but a lot of these science degrees are kind of knowledge for the sake of knowledge, and there's very limited need in the market for it. And then let's talk about another reason that's not a good reason to choose a certain degree, and it's what your family wants. So you have a unique set of skills and talents that could be applied to the market in certain ways, and that is whether you've found your talent market fit or not yet. You might still be trying to find your talent market fit. And it's important to work on yourself to get exposure to a variety of things and see, like, this is something that I enjoy and that I'm good at and is actually needed in the open market. And so your family having fantasies about what you should do for a living, or you feeling pressure to go a certain path because they say it's safe, that turns out to lead people into paths that just don't really work very well for them because it doesn't interest them, it doesn't really reflect their natural talents. You can only force yourself along a certain path for so long. You have to actually have some degree of emotional investment in it and some degree to which you find yourself doing well in it and you find it rewarding and fulfilling. And if this is the only reason why you go down that path and it's just not one that fits those criteria, it's just not going to work for you. And so as a result, you'll end up missing out on finding a career path that may have worked well for you, may have been fulfilling. And yeah, so this is just not the best reason as well to pursue a certain degree. So my advice about how to choose your college degree, what are the things that are actually needed in the market, and how do you find something that will be fulfilling for you? I mean, first, do your research about what's needed in the market. There are numbers and data out there that will help. So I'd say start with the market rather than with the list of majors, because the list of majors honestly is misleading because the vast majority of them don't really have much practicality in the market. If you actually look at what kinds of jobs are out there, and especially what kinds of jobs are have a short supply and a high demand for them, that's actually going to tell you what kinds of jobs are going to be reasonably easy or at least feasible to get into. So instead of just thinking, oh, I'm interested in art history or I'm interested in photography or painting or something, and I'm just going to figure out how to make a living in that, actually look at what are the supply and demand of those fields, or what are the supply and demand of other things that could possibly be of interest to you that will lead you to a viable career path, rather than something that's super saturated, like the few museum positions or the pretty limited number of need of photography in our society. Because lists of majors, like we mentioned, that's for universities to make money. They are trying to appeal to as wide a variety of people's interests as possible to get them in the door, get their money, etc. And so that's just what happens, is that it looks like something that's going to be a viable career path in the long term, but in reality, the university didn't really have your best interests. And that's just a hard truth. I wish it wasn't the case, but it's just the way it is, and unfortunately, the way our economy when it comes to education is going right now. And you may find that college isn't even necessary for the career path that fits you best. And there'd definitely be a lot of upsides to that, saving quite a bit of money, saving quite a bit of time, and not going into student loans, being able to get practical experience early on. I mean, college is it's the fun years, and I can see why it's hard to miss out on it, but it's definitely worth considering just going for a career path that you might do really well with that doesn't require this, and you'll actually probably get ahead of a lot of people. Another piece of advice I will give you is to find something that's lucrative enough that you can also sustain a career path for you. So what kind of work do you end up in a state of flow in? You may have heard this term, a state of flow. It's where you're so kind of engulfed in the task at hand and your mind is just very invested in it. And so you don't really think about the time going by. Like you're not watching the clock or watching the time go by or wanting it to end because your mind is invested in it. Your mind is occupied in it. So if you think about something that's led you into a state of flow, that's a good sign of something that could be a viable career path. I mean, particularly if it leads to something that there's actually an economic need for. So, like, for instance, if you do find yourself, I'll use the example of coding, for instance, even though that's a difficult entry level market at the moment. But if you find yourself doing coding and you end up in a state of flow during it, that can be a sign that maybe tech or technical things could be a good viable career path for you. Or maybe a better example actually would be like finance or accounting, even though some people find that stuff boring. But if you're one of the people that find yourself in a state of flow in those things, like that's needed by pretty much every company. So that could be a good sign for you to consider that career path. And then another thing, for which you will make enough money, think about the career paths that you'll make enough money to afford a decent lifestyle and you'll be able to mitigate significant financial problems. So, not necessarily look for the thing that's the highest paying, but look for the thing that's ideally, like we talked about, that $80,000 to $100,000 a year, which is kind of the point where happiness starts to get into its diminishing returns at that point. But like once you're at that point, you'll be able to mitigate most financial problems. You'll have a decent lifestyle, and things are going to be a lot better than if you were making, say, 40K a year or something. At least, and this all depends on which part of the country you're in or which part of the world you're in, because cost of living varies. But so I do think these are some of the biggest things to consider and look for whatever you want your future career to be. So I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you found the ways to avoid looking for a college degree or a career, and that you have a good idea of what kinds of things to look for. But if you liked this video or found it helpful, I encourage you to give it a thumbs up, like the video, and subscribe to this channel. Provide any comments or questions you have, and stay tuned for future videos about engineering careers and how to be successful in them. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.